The morning of June 14th dawned like a promise whispered by the heavens over the Napa Valley. A crisp, cool air, still carrying the scent of dew-kissed vineyards, swirled beneath a sky so impossibly blue it seemed painted. It was the kind of day that begged for elevation, for a perspective beyond the earthly confines. And for Marcus and Chloe Reed, it was the day for their annual father-daughter ascent in The Wanderer, their vibrant, striped hot air balloon, a beacon of joy against the endless azure. 11-year-old Chloe, all gangly limbs and boundless excitement, bounced on the balls of her feet in the wicker basket, her pigtails a blur of motion as she pointed excitedly at the shrinking landscape below. "Daddy, look, the house is just a tiny speck," she shrieked, her voice a joyful melody carried on the wind. Marcus, his face crinkled with the laugh lines of a man who cherished every moment, steered with a practiced hand, his gaze sweeping the horizon. "Enjoy it, Munchkin," he'd said, his voice a warm rumble. "This is what freedom feels like." From the ground, Evelyn Reed watched them ascend, a familiar ache and fondness swelling in her chest. Her husband, Marcus, a man whose passion for flight was rivaled only by his love for his family, and her bright, curious daughter, Chloe, a miniature reflection of their shared adventurous spirit. She waved until they were just a colorful speck, then a distant memory, swallowed by the vast, indifferent sky. She never imagined that image would be the last. The initial hours after their scheduled return were a blur of frantic phone calls and a creeping dread. The sunset brought no sign of the wanderer. As twilight deepened into a moonless night, the local authorities launched a search and rescue operation, a desperate armada of flashing lights and droning helicopters. Days bled into weeks, weeks into agonizing months. The Napa Valley, usually alive with tourists and laughter, became a canvas of anxiety, dotted with search parties and grim-faced volunteers. Evelyn joined every single one, her heart a raw wound, her eyes scanning the relentless peaks and valleys of the Sierra Nevada, the very mountains her husband so adored, now seeming to mock her with their impenetrable silence. Every report, every piece of debris found that wasn't theirs, was a fresh stab of disappointment, every false lead a cruel trick of hope. The official verdict, when it finally came, felt less like closure and more like a pronouncement of death. A tragic accident, a loss of control, a descent into an unforgiving wilderness. The case was closed, but for Evelyn it was an open wound that time refused to heal. The silence of her once vibrant home was deafening. The echoes of Marcus's booming laughter and Chloe's delighted squeals now mere phantoms. 6 years had passed since that impossibly blue day, 6 years of living in a perpetual twilight of grief, convinced in her gut that the truth, whatever it was, remained stubbornly out of reach, buried somewhere beyond the horizon, just like her family. The small town of Cedar Creek, nestled at the very foot of the majestic Sierra Nevada, breathed slowly, seemingly untouched by the passage of time. Its quaint main street lined with artisanal shops and a perpetually bustling diner offered little solace to Evelyn Reed. 6 years had etched new lines around her eyes, not from age but from a persistent bone-deep weariness. The vibrant hues of her life had faded, replaced by the muted tones of a perpetual autumn. Their family business, Sierra Sky Adventures, once a beacon of joy and adventure, now felt like a silent mausoleum. The hangar, usually bustling with the excited chatter of clients and the rhythmic hiss of burners, stood quiet. The meticulously maintained envelopes of other balloons, brightly colored and promising escape, merely served as poignant reminders of the wanderer and the void it had left behind. Evelyn kept it open, a skeletal crew handling the occasional private charter, not out of passion but out of a desperate, unacknowledged need. It was the last, tangible link to Marcus and Chloe, a fragile thread connecting her to a life that had been abruptly, brutally severed. Every sunrise over the towering peaks of the Sierra brought with it a fresh wave of longing. She'd stand on her porch, mug of cooling coffee in hand, her gaze fixed on the distant ridges where the last reports of the Wanderer had faded into static. Logic, reason, and the official reports all screamed a single, definitive truth. They were gone. Yet an irrational, stubborn ember of hope flickered within her, a quiet defiance against the crushing weight of reality. Maybe, just maybe, they had survived. Maybe they were out there, in some remote canyon, waiting. It was a thought she couldn't articulate, a secret she held close for fear of being deemed delusional. It was the only thing that kept her going. Her days were a monotonous rhythm of paperwork, quiet meals, and the constant, dull ache of absence. Friends had tried at first to pull her back into the light, but their well-meaning efforts eventually dwindled. How could they understand the phantom limb pain of a missing family? How could they comprehend the torment of not knowing? It was Tuesday, a particularly gray and listless Tuesday when the sharp, insistent ring of her landline shattered the oppressive silence of her office. Evelyn flinched, her hand hovering over the receiver as if it might burn her. She rarely received calls from outside the small circle of her remaining clients. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of apprehension. Swallowing hard, she picked it up. "Evelyn Reed," she stated, her voice raspy, a testament to its infrequent use. "Mrs. Reed, this is Detective Sarah Grayson," a crisp, professional voice on the other end said, no nonsense and direct. "I'm calling from the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department. I apologize for the abruptness of this call, but we have an important update regarding the disappearance of your husband, Marcus, and your daughter, Chloe." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat, a gasp that was half hope, half terror. 6 years, 6 years of silence, and now this. The coffee mug slipped from her numb fingers, shattering silently on the worn carpet unnoticed. The world, for a brief, dizzying moment, seemed to tilt on its axis. High above Cedar Creek, where the paved roads gave way to winding dirt tracks and then to nothing but a faint deer trail, lay the true wilderness of the Sierra Nevada National Forest. This was Liam O'Connor's sanctuary. A wiry man in his late 50s with a grizzled beard and eyes that had seen more sunsets from remote peaks than most people had seen from their backyards, Liam wasn't your average weekend hiker. He was a seasoned outdoorsman, a solitary soul who found solace in the raw, untamed heart of nature, often venturing into areas so secluded they weren't even marked on the most detailed topographical maps. It was during one of these deep excursions, far beyond the well-trodden paths and designated campsites, that Liam stumbled upon something deeply unsettling. He was tracking a rare species of mountain owl, his gaze meticulously sweeping the dense underbrush for any sign of movement, when a glint of faded color caught his eye. It was almost perfectly camouflaged, obscured by years of pine needles, fallen branches, and the relentless creep of forest flora. But something about its geometric shape, so incongruous with the organic chaos of the woods, tugged at his seasoned instincts. He knelt, pushing aside thick layers of decaying leaves and tangled roots. What he uncovered sent a cold shiver down his spine. It was a fragment of material, not natural, but manufactured. Faded, but still discernible, were broad stripes of deep crimson and faded gold. As he meticulously cleared more of the debris, the scale of the buried object became unnervingly clear. It was too large, too uniform to be anything but man-made. And then he saw the texture. A durable ripstop fabric, utterly unlike anything one would typically find deep in the forest. A chill wind seemed to whisper through the pines, though the air was still. Liam, for all his wilderness experience, felt a primal unease. This wasn't an abandoned campsite. This was something else entirely. He continued to dig, carefully, methodically. He unearthed a section of wicker, partially crushed, its interwoven strands still holding the faint scent of something metallic, something burned. Then a length of twisted metal tubing, blackened and warped. It took him a moment, but then the pieces clicked into place with a horrifying certainty. He was looking at the remnants of a hot air balloon. But it wasn't just any wreckage, it was buried, deliberately and deeply. Years of natural accumulation couldn't explain the depth and precision of the concealment. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide this. The implications of such an act sent a fresh wave of dread through him. He pulled out his satellite phone, the signal spotty in this remote pocket of the forest, but he persevered. After several attempts, he finally connected to the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department. His voice, usually calm and measured, held a note of urgency. He explained his discovery, giving precise GPS coordinates. The dispatcher, initially skeptical, grew serious as Liam described the nature of the buried debris. Hours later, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple, Liam watched as a caravan of official vehicles, lights flashing faintly through the trees, slowly made its way towards his location. Among them, he noticed a dark sedan that arrived almost as quickly as the first patrol car. Detective Sarah Grayson, her face a mask of professional resolve, stepped out of the sedan, her eyes scanning the scene. She was a woman of sharp intellect and quiet determination, known for her tenacity on cold cases. She listened intently as Liam recounted his discovery, her gaze unwavering, absorbing every detail. Then, as she turned to confirm the identity of the recovered fabric against an old missing persons report, a small, involuntary gasp escaped her lips. The colors, the faded stripes, they matched. She pulled out her phone, her thumb hovering over a contact she hadn't called in years. Her breath hitched. Evelyn Reed, she murmured to herself, a name synonymous with unanswered questions and lingering heartbreak. She pressed the call button, listening to the rings, knowing that the news she was about to deliver would shatter the fragile peace Evelyn had painstakingly built over 6 years, but it might also, finally, offer a sliver of the truth. The drive from Cedar Creek to the remote location Liam O'Connor had described felt impossibly long to Evelyn. The paved road quickly dissolved into a rough, winding dirt track that climbed relentlessly into the higher elevations of the Sierra. Dust plumed behind Detective Grayson's unmarked SUV, coating the pines that lined the path in a fine, reddish film. Each bump and jostle of the vehicle mirrored the frantic beat of Evelyn's heart, a desperate drumroll of hope and terror. When they finally arrived, the scene was already a hive of activity. Uniformed deputies cordoned off a wide area with bright yellow tape, their flashlights piercing the deepening shadows of the dense forest. Forensic specialists in white suits moved with methodical precision, their breath misting in the cool mountain air. The air itself hung heavy with the scent of pine and something else, something metallic, something burned, a faint unsettling echo of the past. Detective Grayson led Evelyn through the perimeter, her hand briefly, reassuringly on Evelyn's arm. "It's about 50 yards further in, Mrs. Reed," she said, her voice softer than it had been on the phone. Mr. O'Connor pinpointed the location exactly. As they approached, Evelyn's gaze fixed on a section of the ground where the earth had been disturbed. A raw, gaping wound in the forest floor, and there, partially excavated, was an object that ripped the last vestiges of normalcy from her world. It was a fragment of a hot air balloon envelope, partially charred but undeniably present. The bold, vibrant stripes of crimson and gold, faded by years of exposure, were unmistakable. The Wanderer. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. It was real. They had found it. A wave of dizzying relief, potent and overwhelming, washed over her, only to be immediately replaced by a chilling dread. If they had found the balloon, why had it taken 6 years? And why here, buried deep in this inaccessible wilderness, so far from any conventional flight path? Detective Grayson, observing Evelyn's reaction, guided her closer. "We need you to officially identify it, Mrs. Reed. Are you certain this is your husband's balloon?" Evelyn nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, absolutely. The stripes, the material. It's the Wanderer." Her voice cracked on the last word. A forensics expert, a young woman with a focused intensity, approached them. "Detective, Mrs. Reed, we've got some preliminary findings here that are perplexing, to say the least." She gestured to the excavation site. This wasn't a crash site where the balloon simply fell and got covered by natural accumulation. The earth around these fragments was meticulously dug and then backfilled. See the disturbed soil patterns? And the way these larger pieces are nested? It suggests a deliberate effort to conceal them, to bury them deep. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Deliberate. Conceal. The words echoed in her mind, each one a hammer blow to her already fragile hope. This wasn't an accident. This was something far more sinister. "We also found traces of what appears to be accelerant near the base of the basket remnants," the expert continued, her voice grim. "And there are clear signs of tampering with the main burner valve assembly. It looks like it was intentionally damaged, designed to fail mid-flight." Detective Grayson's jaw tightened. Her eyes met Evelyn's, a silent communication passing between them. The initial relief Evelyn felt at the discovery evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. This wasn't a tragic accident. This was a crime scene, and the fact that the balloon had been buried, its failure seemingly engineered, screamed of something far more malicious than a simple malfunction. "This changes everything," Detective Grayson stated, her voice low and firm. "This wasn't an accident, Mrs. Reed. Someone wanted that balloon, and possibly its occupants, to disappear, and they went to a lot of trouble to make sure it did." The harsh reality of her words hung in the crisp night air. Evelyn felt a fresh surge of nausea. Her 6 years of quiet suffering, her private hope, were now brutally confirmed. Marcus and Chloe hadn't just vanished. They had been made to vanish, and a terrifying, burning question ignited within her. Who would do such a thing, and why? The wilderness, once a symbol of solace, now felt like a silent accomplice to a heinous act. The chill of the mountain air felt insignificant compared to the icy grip on Evelyn's heart. As the forensic team continued their meticulous work under the glare of portable floodlights, their hushed conversations drifting like ghostly murmurs, Evelyn's mind raced. Sabotage. Intentional damage. Buried. The words replayed, a chilling mantra, each syllable sharpening the image of treachery. Then a flicker of memory, unwelcome yet insistent, pierced through the fog of her shock. Maintenance. "Who was responsible for the last pre-flight check on the Wanderer?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, turning to Detective Grayson. Grayson, her brow furrowed in thought, paused her conversation with a technician. "We're still going through the flight logs and maintenance records from your company, Mrs. Reed. Why?" "Warren Blackwood," Evelyn stated, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. "He was in charge of all the equipment inspections. He was Marcus's business partner." A subtle shift crossed Detective Grayson's face, a slight narrowing of her eyes. It was a familiar name in the local business community. Warren Blackwood, the man who had been Marcus's closest friend since college, the other half of Sierra Sky Adventures. For years, their partnership had seemed unbreakable, a seamless blend of Marcus's adventurous spirit and Warren's meticulous attention to detail. They had built the company from the ground up, fueled by a shared dream of sharing the majesty of the skies. Evelyn had always seen Warren as an extension of their family, a quiet, almost shy man who was fiercely loyal to Marcus. But in the months leading up to the disappearance, a subtle rift had begun to form. Evelyn remembered the late-night discussions, hushed and often ending in frustrated sighs from Marcus. "Warren's getting too ambitious, Eve," Marcus had confided one evening, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "He wants to expand faster than we can afford, take on bigger risks. He's talking about diversifying, whatever that means. It's not just about the balloons anymore for him." Evelyn had brushed it off then, attributing it to the usual stresses of running a growing business. Marcus was the visionary. Warren the pragmatist. A healthy tension, she'd thought. But now, in the chilling light of discovery, those memories twisted into something sinister. Warren was in charge of maintenance. Warren had access to the Wanderer. Warren had been pushing for changes Marcus resisted. He was responsible for all the pre-flight checks, especially on the Wanderer, Evelyn repeated, her voice gaining a desperate edge. Marcus trusted him implicitly. He wouldn't have checked after Warren. No one would. Detective Grayson nodded slowly, absorbing the information. "That's a significant detail, Mrs. Reed. We'll be looking into Mr. Blackwood's involvement very closely." The image of Warren, his usually calm demeanor, now seemed to twist in Evelyn's mind. Could he have been involved? The thought was monstrous, a betrayal too profound to comprehend. But the evidence spoke for itself. Deliberate sabotage, intentional burial. Someone close to Marcus, someone with intimate knowledge of the balloon and its operations. A cold resolve began to settle in Evelyn's chest, hardening the fragile grief. She had spent 6 years living in a haze of uncertainty, accepting a narrative that was now revealed to be a lie. She wouldn't wait for the police to connect every dot. She had to act. She had to know. "I need to go to the office," Evelyn declared, her voice firm, startling even herself. "Sierra Sky Adventures. Warren will be there." Detective Grayson's expression was one of caution. "Mrs. Reed, I understand your urgency, but we advise against you confronting anyone involved at this stage. It could jeopardize the investigation." "No," Evelyn countered, her eyes fixed on the partially excavated balloon. The crimson and gold, once symbols of joy, now screamed of a violent injustice. "I can't wait. Not anymore. Not after this. If someone did this to Marcus and Chloe, I need to know why, and I need to know now." She turned and walked away from the excavation site, leaving the specialists to their grim work. The path back to the SUV felt longer, heavier than before. The fresh, crisp air of the Sierra now carried the bitter taste of betrayal. Her destination was clear: the office of Sierra Sky Adventures, and a confrontation with the man who held the first, most crucial thread to the truth. The familiar building of Sierra Sky Adventures stood on the outskirts of Cedar Creek, a large, modern structure of steel and glass, designed to reflect the expansive skies its business promised. Yet, as Evelyn pulled her car into the mostly empty parking lot, it felt less like a hub of adventure and more like a fortress. The usual buzz of activity was absent. No balloons being prepped, no excited customers milling about. A few cars, all too familiar, sat scattered across the asphalt. She pushed open the heavy glass door, the chime above announcing her arrival with an unsettling echo. The reception area, usually bright and welcoming, felt dim, the fluorescent lights humming with an almost imperceptible tremor. Sarah, the longtime receptionist, a woman whose perpetually cheerful demeanor was as constant as the rising sun, looked up, her smile faltering when she saw Evelyn. Her eyes, normally warm, held a flicker of something Evelyn couldn't quite place: apprehension. Pity? "Evelyn," Sarah stammered, her voice unusually tight. I didn't expect you." "I'm here to see Warren," Evelyn stated, her voice devoid of emotion, a stark contrast to the turbulent storm raging inside her. She needed to be calm, to observe. Just then, a door to an inner office creaked open and Warren Blackwood emerged. He was a man built like a sturdy oak, usually emanating a quiet confidence. But today, his shoulders seemed hunched, his usually neat blonde hair slightly disheveled. His face, ordinarily pale, was an unhealthy shade of ashen, and his eyes, usually a calm blue, darted nervously between Evelyn and Sarah. "Evelyn," he said, his voice a strained whisper as if merely speaking her name required immense effort. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What a surprise. Sarah, why didn't you tell me she was coming?" "She just arrived, Mr. Blackwood," Sarah replied, her gaze fixed on her desk. Warren cleared his throat, adjusting the collar of his shirt. "Evelyn, I know this must be incredibly difficult for you, especially with the news." He gestured vaguely, avoiding her gaze. "But I truly don't think this is a good time. You've been through so much. You must be overwhelmed. Perhaps you should go home and rest." His words, meant to sound solicitous, dripped with an almost desperate urgency. Evelyn's internal alarm bells screamed. He wasn't concerned for her well-being. He was trying to get rid of her. "I'm perfectly fine, Warren," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "In fact, I've never been clearer. I just came from the site. The detective told me everything." She watched him closely, a hunter observing prey. Warren visibly flinched. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. The site? "Oh, yes, of course. A terrible tragedy, Evelyn. Absolutely heartbreaking. Just like we always knew it was." His words were rushed, too insistent. Evelyn's gaze drifted past him into the open office. Two junior employees, usually engrossed in their work, were hunched over their computers, speaking in hushed tones. As Evelyn's eyes landed on them, they stiffened, one quickly minimizing a window on his screen, the other abruptly ending a phone call. She caught a snippet of a conversation as a third employee hurried past, carrying a stack of files. "A urgent shipment before the unexpected visitors arrive." Unexpected visitors? Police, she realized with a jolt. Warren, noticing her distracted gaze, quickly stepped into the doorway, almost physically blocking her view. "Evelyn, really, you look exhausted. Let's talk later, after you've had time to process everything. I'm just about to head out for a very important client meeting." His eyes darted towards a large metal storage cabinet tucked away in a corner of his office. Just as he finished his sentence, Evelyn saw him. A quick, almost imperceptible movement. He snatched something from the top of the cabinet, a thick, unmarked manila envelope, and expertly slid it under a stack of folders on his desk, his back partially turned to her. He then snapped the cabinet door shut with a soft click. It was too quick, too surreptitious to be innocent. A cold certainty solidified in Evelyn's mind. He was hiding something, and that something was very likely connected to Marcus and Chloe. The knot in her stomach tightened, but this time it was not just grief. It was a potent mix of suspicion and a fierce, unyielding determination. She wouldn't leave. Not now. Evelyn's drive from the Sierra Sky Adventures office to her home was a silent, simmering cauldron of anger and suspicion. Warren's forced pleasantries, his desperate attempts to usher her out, the fleeting glimpse of the hidden envelope, and the hushed conversations of his staff. It all coalesced into a chilling portrait of deceit. She gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her gaze fixed on the winding road, but her mind replayed the scene in the office over and over, searching for every tell, every missed detail. As she pulled into her driveway, her phone vibrated. It was Detective Grayson. Evelyn answered immediately, the line feeling like a lifeline. "Mrs. Reed, I just received an update from the forensic team." Detective Grayson's voice came through, a professional calm that belied the gravity of her words. "Their preliminary analysis confirmed significant tampering with the hot air balloon's burner valve assembly. It wasn't a malfunction. It was intentionally damaged, designed to fail." A cold, hard confirmation. Evelyn's breath hitched. "I knew it," she whispered, the words barely audible. "I saw it in the office, Detective. Warren was acting so strangely. He tried to get me to leave immediately, said I was too emotional. He kept glancing at a metal cabinet in his office, and then I saw him, out of the corner of my eye, slide a thick envelope, unmarked, under some files on his desk just before he closed the cabinet. And his employees were acting shifty too, whispering about urgent shipments and unexpected visitors right before you arrived." Detective Grayson was silent for a moment, absorbing Evelyn's rapid-fire observations. "That's exactly what we needed to hear, Mrs. Reed. Your instincts are sharp. We've just confirmed that the tampering points to someone with intimate knowledge of hot air balloon mechanics, someone who knew how to make it look like an accident. And Mr. Blackwood fits that profile perfectly. Evelyn felt a tremor run through her. The man she had considered family, a partner in their shared dream, now stood accused, implicitly, of the most heinous betrayal imaginable. The weight of it was staggering. "What does this mean?" Evelyn asked, her voice cracking with the suppressed emotion. "It means we're no longer treating this as a missing persons case or an accidental crash," Detective Grayson stated, her voice hardening. "This is now a criminal investigation, a homicide, likely, and a kidnapping. We're dispatching officers to Sierra Sky Adventures now. They'll secure the premises and bring in Mr. Blackwood and all his employees for questioning. We'll be looking for those documents you saw and anything else that points to foul play." A flicker of hope, raw and fragile, ignited within Evelyn. Justice. But it was quickly overshadowed by a fresh wave of anxiety. Warren was dangerous, and he knew the police were coming. "He was trying to get rid of something, Detective," Evelyn insisted, her mind racing. "He must know you're on to him. He could destroy evidence or worse." "We're moving as fast as we can, Mrs. Reed," Grayson assured her, though a hint of urgency now tinged her tone. "Our team is already en route, but I need you to stay put. Do not go back there. Do you understand? It could be extremely dangerous." Evelyn understood, but a gut feeling, a primal maternal instinct, screamed at her to act. Warren was cornered. A cornered animal is unpredictable. And if he was hiding something, if he was trying to dispose of crucial evidence, she might be the only one who could stop him before it was too late. She murmured a vague agreement to Detective Grayson, her gaze already drifting towards the keys on the kitchen counter. The phone clicked as the detective hung up, but Evelyn barely registered it. The image of Chloe's smiling face, vibrant against the backdrop of the blue sky, flashed in her mind. 6 years. She wouldn't let 6 more minutes go by without doing everything in her power to find the truth, no matter the risk. The engine of Evelyn's SUV hummed softly as she pulled away from her quiet street, leaving behind the comforting glow of her home and the detective's stern warnings. The image of Warren's furtive movements, the quick, almost imperceptible slide of the envelope, burned in her mind. He was trying to get rid of something, she was certain of it. And if Detective Grayson's officers were on their way, Warren wouldn't waste a second. He had a head start, and Evelyn knew she couldn't afford to wait. The short drive back to Sierra Sky Adventures felt charged with an electric tension. The late afternoon sun, already dipping below the western peaks, cast long, distorted shadows across the parking lot. It was now completely empty save for Warren's sleek black sedan. He was still here. Evelyn parked discreetly a little down the street, out of sight of the main entrance. She cut the engine, the sudden silence deafening. Her heart throbbed a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat of fear mingling with a fierce determination. She had to be careful, silent. Slipping out of her car, she moved with a newfound stealth, her movements precise. The front door was now locked, the open sign flipped to closed. But Evelyn knew the building intimately. She walked around to the side, to a smaller, less used service entrance that led directly into the large storage hangar. It was usually secured with a simple padlock. To her surprise, it was unlocked. Warren, in his haste, must have left it open, or perhaps he was still inside, preparing to leave. She pushed the heavy metal door inward, wincing at the faint squeal of the hinges. The hangar was vast and cavernous, filled with the hushed giants of deflated balloons, their colorful envelopes draped over racks like sleeping beasts. The air was thick with the scent of canvas, propane, and something else, a faint, almost metallic smell that she couldn't quite place. Her eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the high windows. She moved silently, her soft-soled shoes barely scuffing the concrete floor. She headed straight for the area Evelyn had seen Warren looking at earlier, near his private office within the hangar. and there, near the back wall, almost swallowed by shadows, she saw them. Several large, unmarked cardboard boxes stacked haphazardly. They looked new, pristine, and entirely out of place amidst the aging equipment. As Evelyn drew closer, her stomach clenched. These weren't regular supply boxes. They were the exact kind of generic, sturdy cardboard boxes often used for transferring documents or smaller, valuable items, and one of them, the top one, was slightly ajar. She strained her ears. From deeper within the hangar, a faint rhythmic thumping became audible. It was muffled, but unmistakably the sound of a forklift. Warren was moving something, and he was doing it now. A sense of urgency, cold and sharp, cut through her fear. Evelyn peered inside the open box. Her breath hitched. It was filled with files. Not the neatly organized files of a business, but loose papers, some stained, some crumpled. She saw letterheads, invoices, client lists, and then, at the top of the stack, a thick, familiar manila envelope, identical to the one she'd seen Warren slide under his desk. It was marked with a faded, handwritten M.R., Marcus Reed. It was all here, the evidence. Warren wasn't just hiding documents, he was preparing to destroy them. The clatter of the forklift grew louder, closer. He was almost done. He was about to escape, to erase the last traces of his treachery. A surge of adrenaline coursed through Evelyn's veins, silencing the last vestiges of doubt. She had to act. Now. The roaring of the forklift had intensified, a metallic grinding that spurred Evelyn into action. She couldn't let him destroy the evidence. Her instincts, sharp and raw, screamed at her to grab the box of files, to simply take it and run. But something deeper, a terrifying suspicion, held her back. Why was he moving all these boxes? What else was hidden on this property? And why hadn't he simply burned them right here? She ducked behind a stack of deflated balloon envelopes, their soft material muffling the sound of her frantic breathing. Peeking out, she watched as Warren, his face grim and determined, maneuvered the forklift. He wasn't just moving the boxes of files. He was loading several other larger crates, wrapped tightly in industrial-grade plastic, onto a flatbed truck parked just inside the massive hangar door. The truck, a nondescript, older model, was one Evelyn didn't recognize as belonging to Sierra Sky Adventures. As he finished loading the last crate, Warren climbed into the truck's cab. The engine rumbled to life, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the concrete floor. Evelyn's heart pounded. This was it. He was moving everything. She knew she shouldn't follow. Detective Grayson's warning echoed in her ears. It could be extremely dangerous. But the image of Chloe's face, vibrant and alive in her memory, pushed aside all fear. She had to know where those boxes, where that envelope was going, and the crates, what was in the crates. As the truck slowly lumbered out of the hangar and onto the street, Evelyn sprinted back to her SUV. She started the engine, her hands fumbling slightly with the gear shift. She waited until the truck had turned onto the main road, its taillights glowing like defiant red eyes in the gathering dusk, before pulling out, keeping a safe distance. She didn't want him to know she was there. The chase was less a high-speed pursuit and more a tense, agonizing crawl through the back roads of Cedar Creek. Warren drove cautiously, adhering to speed limits, almost as if he were trying to blend in. But his destination spoke volumes. He bypassed the freeway, opting instead for a series of increasingly deserted, poorly lit roads that wound deeper into the valley, away from residential areas and towards the industrial fringes. Evelyn's phone, clutched in her trembling hand, was already dialing Detective Grayson. "Detective, it's Evelyn," she whispered urgently, her eyes glued to the truck ahead. "He's moving things. He's got a truck, a gray flatbed, probably mid-90s model. I'm following him." "Mrs. Reed, what are you doing?" Grayson's voice was sharp with alarm. "I told you to stay put. This is incredibly reckless." He just loaded a bunch of boxes, and those larger crates onto this truck, Evelyn insisted, ignoring the reprimand. "He's trying to destroy everything. He's heading towards the old industrial district near the abandoned lumber mill." She glanced at her dashboard GPS, relaying the coordinates as quickly as she could. "I'm on Redwood Road, just past the old railway tracks. He's going slow. You can still catch him." "Stay on the line," Grayson commanded, her voice now laced with professional urgency. "Do not engage. Keep your distance. Units are already diverting to your location. Give me updates every minute." Evelyn kept her phone on speaker, tucked into the cup holder, her attention unwavering from the truck's red glow. The road became rougher, pockmarked with potholes, the surrounding landscape transforming from scattered homes to derelict warehouses and decaying factories. The air grew heavy with the faint, acrid smell of old machinery and disuse. Finally, the truck slowed, its brakes squealing faintly. It turned off the main road onto a narrow, unpaved lane, overgrown with weeds, and disappeared behind the hulking skeletal frame of a long-abandoned lumber mill. Evelyn pulled her SUV into the deep shadows of a stand of pines, killed the engine, and watched. The truck had stopped in front of a dilapidated, windowless warehouse, its corrugated metal walls scarred with rust. Warren, a solitary figure in the fading light, emerged from the cab. He walked to the back of the truck, his movements deliberate, and began to unstrap the plastic-wrapped crates. Evelyn's breath hitched. She could hear the distinct sound of a padlock being unlatched, the creak of a heavy metal door. This wasn't just about destroying evidence. This felt like a place where secrets were kept, where darkness thrived. And she was about to witness what Warren Blackwood had been hiding for 6 long years. The vast, decaying warehouse loomed before Evelyn, a silent monolith of forgotten industry. The cold air, thick with the smell of dust and damp concrete, prickled her skin. Warren had backed the truck up to a large, unmarked side door, which now stood ajar, a rectangle of deeper darkness in the faint light filtering from the outside. Evelyn, moving with a desperate caution, crept towards the open door, her heart hammering against her ribs. She pressed herself against the cold metal of the building, peeking inside. The interior was even darker than the outside, save for the weak beam of a single flashlight moving erratically. Warren was inside, his back to her, grunting with effort as he unloaded one of the large plastic-wrapped crates from the truck, guiding it onto a heavy-duty hand truck. Another figure, shadowy and indistinct in the gloom, moved near a far wall, their movements quick and furtive. Evelyn strained her eyes, trying to discern what they were doing. Then, from a hidden recess in the wall, a section Evelyn hadn't even noticed from the outside, a panel slid open with a soft metallic scrape, and from within that newly revealed darkness, a figure was pushed out. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She gripped the cold metal of the warehouse wall, her nails digging into her palms. The figure was small, slight, and moved with a halting, uncertain gait. Even in the poor light, Evelyn saw it. A familiar head of tangled, light brown hair, a pair of the worn sneakers, and as the figure turned slightly, her head lifting, Evelyn saw her face. It was Chloe, her daughter, Chloe, alive. A choked sob tore through Evelyn's throat, but it was swallowed by the cavernous silence of the warehouse. Chloe looked older, thinner, her face smudged with dirt, her usually vibrant eyes wide with a weariness that twisted Evelyn's gut. Her hands, Evelyn noticed with a fresh wave of horror, were bound in front of her. Warren, apparently oblivious to Evelyn's presence, spoke in a low, curt voice to the shadowy figure, who was now pulling Chloe towards one of the plastic-wrapped crates. "Get her in. Now. The sooner she's out of here, the better. Police are probably on their way." He was talking about her, about Chloe. He was going to move her. He was going to take her away again. A primal scream built in Evelyn's chest, a desperate, animalistic cry. 6 years of not knowing, 6 years of quiet despair, suddenly shattered into a million pieces by this impossible, horrifying truth. Chloe was alive. She had been alive all this time, and Warren, Marcus's partner, her trusted friend, had held her captive. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. If Chloe was here, hidden away, then Marcus must be dead. Murdered. By Warren. The man who had been at their side for decades, who had mourned with her, offered false comfort, had been the architect of her family's destruction. A red haze descended over Evelyn's vision, eclipsing everything but the sight of her daughter, bound and terrified, being forced towards a crate. The years of quiet grief, of living with a phantom hope, transmuted into a burning, incandescent rage. Fear vanished, replaced by an unstoppable, ferocious determination. She was a mother, and her child was in danger. She didn't know what she would do, or how. She was unarmed, alone, and facing two men. But in that moment, as she watched Chloe being pushed, her small frame resisting, Evelyn knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not let them take her daughter again. Not after 6 years. Not ever. She had to act. Now. The warehouse air seemed to crackle with the silent intensity of Evelyn's resolve. She watched, frozen in a horrifying tableau, as the other man, a hulking figure Evelyn didn't recognize, his face obscured by shadow, roughly pushed Chloe towards the open crate. Her daughter, a prisoner in her own nightmare, stumbled, her bound hands flailing for balance. The rage in Evelyn was a hot, roaring inferno. She took a step forward, a primal scream ready to tear from her throat, when the world outside exploded. A sudden, piercing shriek of sirens rent the night, echoing through the desolate industrial district. Red and blue lights, strobing wildly, sliced through the inky darkness, painting the rusted walls of the warehouse in an eerie, pulsing glow. Tires screeched as vehicles skidded to a halt just outside. Inside, the reaction was instantaneous. Warren froze, his head snapping towards the open door, his face a mask of furious disbelief. The other man, startled, released Chloe, who sagged to the concrete floor. "Police! El Dorado Sheriff's Department! Drop your weapon and put your hands where I can see them," a booming voice commanded from outside, amplified by a loudspeaker. Warren, his jaw clenched, made a desperate lunge for something on the hand truck. A glint of dark metal that Evelyn recognized with a fresh wave of terror as a handgun. But before his fingers could close around the grip, figures in tactical gear, silhouetted against the flashing lights, burst through the warehouse door. The air filled with shouts, the thud of heavy boots, and then a series of sharp, deafening cracks. Gunshots. Evelyn instinctively ducked behind the towering stack of deflated balloons, her heart leaping into her throat. She heard a grunt of pain, a heavy thud, and then the urgent, authoritative commands of the officers. "Hands up, don't move, you're under arrest." Peeking out, Evelyn saw Warren sprawled on the concrete floor, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle, the handgun skittering away from his grasp. Several officers swarmed him, their movements swift and decisive, securing him with zip ties. The other man, who had been guarding Chloe, was also subdued, pinned against a wall by two other deputies. The immediate danger had passed, but the air still thrummed with residual tension. Evelyn's gaze immediately darted to Chloe. Her daughter was still on the floor, curled into a tight ball, her head buried in her knees, trembling violently. "Chloe!" Evelyn cried, her voice raw with years of pent-up emotion and newfound terror. She scrambled out from behind her hiding place, ignoring the shouted warnings of the officers. Detective Grayson, her expression a mix of relief and exasperation, was already making her way towards them, her hand instinctively going to her sidearm. "Mrs. Reed, are you all right? I told you not to." Evelyn didn't hear her. She was already kneeling beside Chloe, her hands reaching out, hesitating for a moment, afraid to scare her. "Chloe, my sweet girl, it's Mommy, I'm here." Chloe slowly lifted her head, her face tear-streaked and pale. Her eyes, wide and unfocused, met Evelyn's. For a long, agonizing moment, there was only confusion, a flicker of disbelief. Then recognition, and a slow, profound shift in her gaze, from fear to a fragile, burgeoning hope. "Mommy," Chloe whispered, her voice a thin, reedy sound, barely audible above the fading echoes of the raid. It was the sweetest sound Evelyn had heard in 6 years. Evelyn wrapped her arms around her daughter, pulling her into a tight, desperate embrace. Chloe was stiff at first, unaccustomed to the touch, but slowly, tentatively, her small arms encircled Evelyn's waist. The relief that flooded Evelyn was so immense, so overwhelming it nearly buckled her knees. Chloe was real. She was here. She was alive. The years of agonizing uncertainty, of a hollow ache, were finally, miraculously, over. The nightmare was ending. And as Chloe buried her face in Evelyn's shoulder, a single, shuddering sob escaping her lips, Evelyn knew the long, arduous journey of healing had just begun. The hospital room was stark, sterile, a world away from the dust and shadows of the warehouse. Chloe, still pale and fragile, lay in the bed, an IV drip a stark line against her arm. Evelyn sat beside her, holding her hand, her thumb tracing small, comforting circles on her daughter's skin. Detective Grayson stood quietly by the door, her expression a mix of solemnity and grim satisfaction. After initial medical assessments, and once Chloe was stable enough, the words began to come, slowly at first, then in a torrent of repressed terror and pain. He made us fall," Chloe whispered, her voice still hoarse, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. "Daddy tried to fix it. He kept pulling the valve, but nothing happened. We were going down so fast." Her small hand tightened in Evelyn's. "Daddy was yelling at him, at Warren through the radio. He said Warren had sabotaged it, that he'd kill him." A fresh wave of nausea washed over Evelyn, the confirmation, brutal and direct, from her own daughter. "When we crashed," Chloe continued, her eyes closing briefly, reliving the horror, "it was really hard. Daddy was hurt really bad. And Warren came. He was already there, waiting. He pulled Daddy out of the basket. Daddy tried to fight him, even though he was bleeding. Warren hit him with something heavy. Daddy fell, and he didn't move." Tears began to stream silently down Chloe's face. Warren just left him there. He said Daddy deserved it for standing in his way. Evelyn squeezed her eyes shut, a silent scream trapped in her throat. Marcus, gone, murdered by his closest friend. "Then Warren grabbed me." Chloe's voice trembled. "He told me not to scream or he'd leave me too. He put something over my mouth, and he took me to that place, the warehouse. He said if I ever tried to escape, or if I told anyone, he'd make sure no one ever found me." For 6 years, Chloe had been living in that hidden room, a prisoner in the dark heart of the Sierras. Warren would visit sometimes, bringing her food, books, carefully curated news that never mentioned her disappearance, reinforcing her isolation. He kept her isolated, told her lies about Evelyn, that she had moved on, forgotten her. He even showed her staged photographs of Evelyn, looking happy, living a life without her. It was a psychological torment, designed to break her spirit and sever her connection to the outside world. Detective Grayson stepped forward, her voice gentle. "Chloe, can you tell us why Mr. Blackwood did this? What was he after?" Chloe nodded, her small face etched with a maturity far beyond her years. "He used to tell me. He said Daddy was holding him back, that Daddy didn't want the company to grow big enough. Warren had bad people he was working with. He used to make Daddy sign papers late at night. Daddy hated it. He said Warren was using Sierra Sky Adventures for more than just balloons, for money, for things that weren't legal." Evelyn remembered Marcus's frustrated complaints about Warren's diversification plans, the hushed arguments. It clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Warren hadn't just wanted control of the company. He had been using it as a front, likely for illegal activities, perhaps money laundering or something even darker. Marcus, with his unwavering integrity, had discovered it and threatened to expose him. His honesty had cost him his life. "We have confirmed, Mrs. Reed," Detective Grayson said, her voice heavy, "that human remains were found near the buried balloon wreckage. Preliminary identification points to them being Marcus's. It will take some time for full confirmation, but based on Chloe's testimony and the evidence we've gathered at the site, we have no doubt." The finality of it was a bitter pill, but also a strange, mournful release. Marcus was truly gone, but his spirit lived on in Chloe, in the fierce light that had survived 6 years of unimaginable darkness. Chloe looked up at Evelyn, her eyes still holding traces of the terror, but now also a fragile, blossoming hope. "Mommy," she whispered, "is it really over? Am I really free?" Justice, in the American system, moved with a slow, grinding inevitability. Warren Blackwood, stripped of his carefully constructed facade, stood trial. The evidence was overwhelming. Chloe's harrowing testimony, the forensic analysis of the sabotaged balloon, the discovery of Marcus's remains, and the myriad of documents found in the warehouse detailing his illicit activities, from shell corporations to elaborate money laundering schemes. He was found guilty on all counts: murder, kidnapping, and a host of financial crimes. His accomplice, identified as a transient with a history of petty crime, received a lesser but still substantial sentence for his role in Chloe's captivity. For Evelyn and Chloe, the courtroom dramas, the endless questions from lawyers and therapists were a necessary but exhausting part of their new reality. The world outside the hospital room, then the secured safe house, felt both dazzlingly bright and terrifyingly alien to Chloe. 6 years of isolation had left deep scars, not just physical but psychological. She was no longer the bouncing, carefree 11-year-old who had soared into the sky. She was a quiet, watchful teenager, her eyes holding a haunted wisdom far beyond her years. The road to healing was not a straight path, but a winding, often painful journey. There were breakthroughs, moments of connection, bursts of her old self that brought tears to Evelyn's eyes. But there were also nightmares, flashbacks, and a profound, lingering distrust that made even simple interactions difficult. Therapy sessions became a cornerstone of their days, a safe space for Chloe to slowly unpack the unimaginable trauma she had endured, and for Evelyn to learn how to parent a child who had returned from a different world. Evelyn, too, was in therapy, grappling with the compounded grief of losing Marcus and the brutal realization of Warren's betrayal. Yet, through it all, there was an unbreakable thread that held them together: their shared survival, their unwavering love. They spent countless hours simply being, rediscovering each other. Evelyn would read to Chloe, just as she had when she was small, her voice a soothing balm. They baked cookies, a simple act that brought back a flicker of joy to Chloe's eyes. They revisited old photo albums, Evelyn narrating stories of Marcus, keeping his memory alive, allowing Chloe to slowly reconcile the father she remembered with the tragic truth of his end. Months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Evelyn and Chloe stood in a quiet, secluded meadow in the Sierra foothills, far from the site of the crash, yet close enough to feel the presence of the mountains. They held a small, rough-hewn wooden box. Inside were Marcus's ashes, returned to them after forensic confirmation. "Daddy loved this spot," Chloe murmured, her voice soft, a hint of her old self in its gentle tone. "He said you could see the whole world from here." Evelyn nodded, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. He did. He loved being up high, seeing everything. Together, they scattered the ashes into the gentle breeze. The fine gray dust swirled, carried by the wind, becoming one with the earth, the trees, the vast, open sky. It was a moment of profound sadness, but also of quiet release. Marcus was free, finally. Chloe reached for Evelyn's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. She looked up, not at the sky, but at Evelyn, her eyes clear, a fragile light beginning to shine within them. "It's different now, isn't it, Mommy?" Evelyn looked at her daughter, at the strength in her gaze, the resilience radiating from her small frame. "Yes, sweet girl, it's different, but we're together, and that's all that matters." She squeezed Chloe's hand. "We'll build something new. One day at a time, together." Chloe nodded, a faint, genuine smile gracing her lips, a smile Evelyn hadn't seen in 6 long years. "Together," she echoed softly, looking out at the endless expanse of mountains, not as a place of terror, but as a silent, steadfast witness to their reclaimed future. It was a promise, whispered on the wind, a testament to the enduring power of family and the quiet, miraculous beginning of healing.